The fifth knock came at 9:17 p.m., soft but certain. And Emily Carter closed her eyes before walking to the door. She already knew it was Daniel Harper. He had come upstairs 4 times that week, always with the same quiet apology and the same gentle request for conversation. She told herself she was only being polite, only being kind. But kindness was not what made her heart race as she reached for the handle. When she opened the door, Daniel stood there in a gray sweater, rain clinging to his shoulders from the Portland drizzle. He looked calm, but his eyes carried something restless. "Sorry to bother you again," he said. "I just needed to clear my head." Emily stepped aside without thinking. "You're not bothering me." That was the truth. And that was the problem. Daniel rented the basement apartment of her townhouse. It moved in 3 months earlier after relocating from Seattle. He paid rent on time, kept to himself, and never caused trouble. At first, it was just the older tenant downstairs. 45, divorced, polite, but during a power outage one stormy evening. They had ended up talking by candlelight in her kitchen. That conversation had lasted 2 hours. Since then, something had changed. Now he was sitting at her small wooden table again, hands wrapped around a mug of tea she had prepared without asking what he wanted. She already knew. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. Inside, the air felt warm and close. "I heard from her today," Daniel said quietly. Emily leaned back in her chair. "Your ex?" He nodded. "She's engaged." The words landed. Between them, Daniel did not raise his voice. He did not speak badly about anyone. He simply looked tired. 10 years of building a life with someone only to watch it end with a calm conversation and packed boxes. He had told Emily parts of the story during the previous visits, not in dramatic detail, just enough to show the bruise beneath his steady expression. "I thought I was okay," he continued. But hearing that, it makes it final. Emily understood final. Her own marriage had ended 2 years earlier. Not with anger, but with silence. 2 people who slowly stopped reaching. For each other, no big fight, just distance. "I'm sorry," she said gently. He gave a small shrug. "I don't want to go backward. I just don't know how to move forward." That was why he kept coming upstairs. They talked about starting over in their 30s and 40s, about how friends assumed healing had a timeline, about the strange loneliness that followed long relationships. The conversation flowed quickly, moving from heavy truths to light memories. They laughed about old music. They compared childhood stories. The pace felt natural, easy, like they had known each other longer than 3 months. But beneath the comfort, something else was building. Emily noticed how he listened. Truly listened. When she spoke, he didn't interrupt or try to fix anything. He just paid attention. And after years of feeling invisible in her marriage, that kind of attention felt powerful. She caught herself studying his face when he looked down at his cup, the small crease near his brow, a silver at his temples. He was older, yes, but there was a steadiness about him that made her feel safe. She shifted in her chair. "You don't have to keep apologizing for coming up here," she said. "It's okay." He looked at her carefully. "I don't want to overstep." Overstep, the word lingered. They both knew the situation was unusual. A landlord and her tenant sitting close at night sharing personal stories. It wasn't wrong, it wasn't inappropriate. But it wasn't simple either. "I don't feel uncomfortable," she admitted. His eyes softened slightly. "Good." Silence followed, but it wasn't awkward. It was charged. Emily stood to rinse their mugs, needing a moment to steady herself. She felt alert, aware of his presence behind her. She hated how quickly her body reacted to him standing in her kitchen. When she turned back, he was watching her, not boldly, not disrespectfully, just with curiosity. "I didn't expect to find a friend here," he said. Friend, the word, felt smaller than what was happening. "You're not exactly what I expected either," she replied before she could stop herself. He smiled at that. Not a wide grin, but something warmer. The clock ticked past 10, then 10:30. This was the fifth night in 1 week he had come upstairs. 5 times she had told herself to keep it casual. 5 times she had failed. The exhaustion she felt wasn't from hosting him. It was from holding her emotions in place. Every conversation peeled back another layer. Every laugh made the connection deeper. Daniel finally stood. "I should let you rest," he said. She walked him to the door again. It had become a routine too quickly. When he stepped onto the porch, he hesitated. "Thank you," he said. "You make this easier." Her heart tightened. "You make it easier, too." The rain had stopped. The air felt cool and fresh. For a moment, neither of them moved. There was space between them, enough to be respectful, close enough to feel the warmth. Emily knew she should step back first. Instead, she held his gaze. It would be so easy, she thought, to lean forward, to close that space, but she didn't, and neither did he. Boundaries, he gave a small nod and turned toward the basement entrance. She watched him disappear down the side stairs. When she closed the door, the house felt too quiet. The warmth he had brought lingered in the room like a memory. She pressed her back against the door and exhaled. This was dangerous, not because he was reckless, not because he was inappropriate, but because he was kind. And kindness had always been her weakness. Upstairs in her bedroom, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. She replayed his words, his expressions, the way his voice softened when he said her name. 5 visits in 1 week. 5 times she had told herself it was just conversation. But her pulse betrayed her. She thought about the practical side. He was her tenant. There were contracts, responsibilities. What if things became complicated? What if it ended badly? What if she had to ask him to leave? Her mind raced fast, jumping from fear to hope and back again. She turned onto her side and stared at the window. She had spent 2 years protecting her heart, working, paying bills, building a stable life. She had promised herself no more risks. Yet here she was, losing sleep over a man who lived downstairs. The next evening passed without a knock. She tried to focus on paperwork. She tried to watch television. But she kept listening for footsteps. Nothing. The silence felt heavier than his presence. On the second night, she heard him come home. The sound of the basement door closing echoed. Faintly, she froze, waiting. No knock. A strange disappointment settled in her chest. Now she understood her exhaustion clearly. It wasn't that Daniel had drained her. It was that he had awakened something she had worked hard to quiet. Longing, connection, hope, and hope was risky. She rolled onto her back again, staring at the ceiling for the second night in a row. Maybe it was better this way, she told herself. Space would cool things down. Space would return everything to normal. But deep down, she knew something had shifted. 5 visits had changed the rhythm of her home. And if he knocked again, she wasn't sure she would have the strength to pretend it meant nothing. 2 nights passed without a knock, and Emily Carter told herself it was a good thing. Distance would fix everything. Distance would cool the warmth that had grown too fast between her and Daniel Harper. She kept busy after work, answered emails, cleaned the kitchen twice, even rearranged the bookshelf in the living room. But the quiet felt louder than any conversation they had shared. The townhouse seemed bigger, colder, and strangely empty. On Friday evening, as the sun dipped behind the gray Portland sky, she stepped outside to take out the trash. That was when she saw him near the driveway. The trunk of his car was open. A suitcase sat inside. Her stomach dropped. Daniel noticed her and straightened. He looked calm, but there was tension in his shoulders. "Hey," he said gently, "are you going somewhere?" She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He nodded. "Once I got a call from my old company in Seattle. They offered me a senior position, better salary, more stability." The words came fast, like he had rehearsed them. "That's great." She replied automatically. It sounded hollow even to her own ears. He closed the trunk but didn't lock. I haven't accepted yet. She folded her arms more to protect herself than to seem firm. Why not? It sounds like what you need. He held her gaze. Because I don't want to run again. The air between them shifted. He stepped a little closer, careful to keep a respectful space. After my breakup, I thought moving here would fix everything. New city, new start. But you can't escape feelings by changing zip codes. Her heart beat harder. And now, she asked quietly, now I'm scared of staying for the wrong reason. The honesty hit her like cold water. You think I'm the wrong reason? She asked. No, he said quickly. You're the real reason. That's what makes it serious. Silence stretched. Cars passed at the end of the street. A dog barked somewhere nearby. The world kept moving, but everything around them felt. Paused. I stopped coming upstairs, he continued, because every time I did, I left wanting more. 5 times in 1 week, Emily. 5 times I told myself to keep it simple. Just talk, just friendship. But it stopped feeling simple. Her breath caught. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't pushing. It was simply telling the truth. I didn't. Want to blur lines? He said. You're my landlord. You deserve stability, not confusion. She swallowed. You think this is confusing? I think it's powerful. The word lingered. Emily looked down at the driveway, gathering her thoughts. She had spent years building control after her divorce. She managed her home alone, paid every bill on time. She promised herself she would never depend on anyone emotionally again. Yet here she was, shaken by the idea of him leaving. You don't get to decide alone, she said finally, lifting her eyes to his. If something is happening, it involves both of us. Daniel studied her face carefully. Is something happening? She could have denied it. She could have taken the safe path. But she was tired of safety. Yes, she said simply. The word felt bold and freeing. He exhaled slowly, like he had been holding his breath for days. I didn't imagine it then. No, she said. You didn't. They stood there in the fading light, the distance between them charged but respectful. No one rushed forward. No one crossed a line. The emotion was strong but controlled. I don't want to be another temporary chapter in someone's life, Daniel said. If I stay with intention. Not because it's easy. It's not easy, she replied. It scares me too. He gave a small nod. Good, she almost laughed. Good. It means it matters. Her chest tightened at that dot. For a long time after her marriage ended, she avoided anything that felt intense. Intensity had once led to disappointment. But this felt different. There was no rush, no false promises. Just 2 adults standing in the open air, acknowledging something real. What happens if it doesn't work? He asked. She thought about that carefully. She imagined awkward mornings, paperwork, conversations about leases and boundaries. It would be complicated. But she also imagined him driving away. Tonight, and never knowing what could have grown. We handle it like adults, she said. We don't punish each other for trying. He searched her face, looking for hesitation. He didn't find it, and the tenant situation. He asked gently. A small smile appeared on her lips. If we decide to move forward, we change it. No more landlord and tenant. He raised an eyebrow. You're serious? I don't mix business and feelings, she replied. If we do this, we do it clean. The clarity in her voice surprised even her. Daniel stepped back slightly, running a hand through his hair. The tension in him softened. I thought leaving would make things easier for you. It wouldn't, she admitted. That was the most honest sentence she had spoken in a long time. The sky darkened further. Streetlights flickered on. So what are you saying? He asked quietly. She walked closer, stopping just within reach but not touching him. I'm saying I don't want you to leave because you're afraid. If you take the job, take it because it's your dream. It's not because you're scared of what we might become. He studied her, and something warm passed through his expression. "I haven't felt this steady about someone in years," he confessed. "You don't rush me, you don't judge me, you just see me." Her eyes softened. "You see me too," and that was the truth. He had noticed her quiet strength, her discipline, her hidden loneliness. He treated her with respect, not pity. He admired her independence without feeling threatened by it. That kind of connection was rare. Daniel looked toward the suitcase in his trunk. Then back at her. "If I stay," he said, "we take it slow." She nodded immediately. "Slow is good. No secrets, no half steps." "Agreed. And if either of us feels unsure, we talk about it." She smiled. "Deal?" The simplicity of the agreement made everything feel lighter. He reached for his phone and opened his email. In front of her, he typed a short message declining the Seattle offer. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't hesitate. When he hit send, he looked up at her. "I'm not staying for fantasy," he said. "I'm staying for possibility." Her heart steadied at those words. Weeks passed quickly after that evening. Daniel began searching for a new apartment nearby. He insisted on it. He wanted their relationship to start without contracts hanging over them. The basement apartment soon emptied. Boxes were carried out. Keys were returned. The transition was smooth, respectful. They started dating like any two adults in the city. Coffee shops, long walks along the river, quiet dinners at home. No rushing. No pressure. Emily noticed something surprising. She no longer felt exhausted before. The exhaustion came from holding back, from pretending their connection was casual, from guarding her heart. Now she felt calm. There were still nerves, there were still careful conversations. But there was honesty. One evening, weeks later, they sat side by side on her couch after a long day. The house felt warm again, but not overwhelming, just steady. "You know," she said softly, "that week you kept knocking on my door? I thought you were wearing me out." He smiled slightly. "I was wearing myself out, too." She leaned her head back against the couch. "It wasn't you? It was the effort of pretending I didn't feel anything." He looked at her, serious but gentle. "I'm glad we stopped pretending. So am I outside." The city moved as always. Cars passed. Neighbors laughed. Life continued. Inside the townhouse, something had settled into place. Not a dramatic love story. Not a whirlwind romance. Just a people who chose courage over comfort. And this time, the knocking had stopped. Not because the door was closed, but because it was finally open.